Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. Pessimism leads to weakness, optimism to power. William James, our guest today, is not only a friend of the Culture Matters podcast, but a staple on our show. If you haven't heard him on the show, clearly you're not listening. He's the founder of EPM, a mentor to many, a comrade, a visionary, a fun effing person who loves people, cares about culture, cares about his people, invests in his people, works harder than just about everybody I know. So listen closely, listen carefully. And this quote, I picked this to introduce Eddy Perez. Pessimism leads to weakness, optimism to power, because this is one powerful guy. Thanks for coming back.
My pleasure.
What comes to mind? Because we're going to be talking about decision making today with this quote. What comes to mind as it relates to decision making, as someone that is under fire on a daily basis to make decisions, to help people make those calls? When you hear, pessimism leads to weakness, optimism to power, what comes to mind as it relates to decision making?
Well, I don't think you get anywhere without action. It's just that simple. So I think passiveness means you're expecting somebody, and you hear it all the time, you know, to figure out what you really meant by then instead of and expecting them to be a mind reader. So I'm not surprised because optimism also requires you to actually either believe a certain way, and usually you believe a certain way because of certain things you do and certain things that you do with a consistency. So it's optimism is really action with motion put into practice. That is what builds not only your self-assurance, but why it gives you power, because the true power in life, and why the word power is mistaken as influence instead of force, where some people say, oh, that guy has power, but it's more of a fear, not respect.
Optimism is action in motion, you said.
Yeah.
What brings you to that conclusion? That's powerful.
Well, optimism is like a belief. Now, look, I think where optimism gets a bad rap, and let me unpack that real quick, is sometimes people do not believe that optimists are real. Um, and I would say no, because I think they understand the situation. They just look at it as how do they go solve the challenge? Because in any optimistic view, there has to be an opportunity, and an opportunity only exists when there's either disruption or something's not being done well or something new that requires action. And, there's no shortage of people that died on their deathbed not seizing their talents. There's no shortage.
Mm.
And I'd challenge all humans. I think no matter how well somebody's done in their life, and what I mean by that is impact, not financial. I think they all deep down thought, even the people who have done the best, not that's not good enough or that wasn't enough. So none of that perfection, actually quite the opposite, more risk taking. But they always said, I could have done a little bit here, a little bit there more. Now, mind you, these people are doing well and winning, but they still don't think they did enough. And I think that's actually a gift if you have that type of mindset.
Is that tie into a part of optimism? So you're a part of optimism in your view is having some level of criticism of oneself.
Yes. Yes. I do believe that. Holding yourself to a high standard.
Holding yourself to a high standard.
I'd say more of a standard, not is it self-criticism? Sure. I've never met anybody who's achieved a lot that wasn't pretty hard and demanding on themselves. That's just, it's kind of like saying a great athlete, they all worked out. Of course they did. That's part of the criteria. So I think
What,
that's part of the criteria is to really hold yourself to a standard that most would not.
what's a way that someone that's listening to this can start holding themselves to a higher standard?
Hold themselves accountable to the things they're not doing. And that could be as simple as their dentist telling them that they need to brush more, but every night before they go to sleep, they just don't do it and wonder why they're not having results. Simple as that. Embracing the things you know you should be doing, but you're not doing. Just and I would tell people, because it's like momentum, like a snowball, is instead of trying to tackle the biggest thing first, start tackling 10 or 15 smaller things. And then that'll build you up to the bigger one. Because what you'll quickly realize is the bigger one's really, what makes it big is it's actually the part of 100 things you got to do, not 5. So little things matter because the little things are what hold up the whole bridge.
What are some tactics that you've used or methods to get clear on what it is that you have to do? Do you make lists? Do you grade something from highest to hardest to weakest, and then start with that weakest?
Well, I think first you got to do,
advice?
I think before you come to that conclusion, you got to do some reflection. You got to look in the mirror and see what has worked, what hasn't worked. When it has worked, why did it work? What did you do differently? When it didn't work, why didn't it work again? And how could you now do something differently? So I think self-inventory is probably pretty important.
On both sides, pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that part of your or has it been a part of your decision-making process?
I wouldn't say today. I've fortunately, because of a lot of the trainings and the skills that I've developed, I can kind of listen better today and kind of hear what actions need to be taken sooner. Now, do I sit there in my head and analyze really quickly the pros and cons? Yeah. And do I take notes? Yes. But a lot of it has to come with, okay, I hear you, but what do we need to attack now?
How do you view decision-making as it relates to leadership?
Do what? Excuse me?
How do you view decision-making as it relates to leadership?
Well, there's sometimes the best decisions are no decision. And what I mean by that is, I think it depends on your role too. So leadership's a very broad, I can say from my purview that you set up guardrails and you let people, you empower them to make mistakes, to make adjustments, to zigzag through. And, it's not a straight line. I also think by the leader, it depends on how big the guardrails are, and I'll use it because it's very easy to use on a road. Are you leading somebody who's newer or hasn't developed to the level you want? So is it a 2-lane highway? Is it somebody more experienced, so it's a 4-lane highway? Or is it somebody that you can give a lot of latitude to because they're higher level caliber and you can leave more? However, you do have to make some decisions. There is, ironically, when people talk about, democracy and freedom, there are decisions that have to get made even here. There's a reason why, yes, things have to get done in Congress, but there are, in a certain capacity, the president has executive orders that they can do. That's the same thing as a CEO. So sometimes CEOs get bad raps about being tyrants, and I'm not going to sit here and say there are some that are not. However, sometimes you've got to hold the standard and you got to set it and you got to say it's time to make a decision. We got to take action, because that'll also inspire the troops if they know how and why, when you explain it, the reasons and what's going on there.
How can one navigate that in a constructive way, would you say?
How does somebody navigate that
in a constructive way?
That's a good question. I don't know. I got to think about that one. I don't know what would be I think there's a few different ways. I think depending on the person's personality, I think that, there is no one size fits all. There's one size fits for you. So
where does listening come in?
Listening is very crucial because people will give you the answers to the test. Life's an open book test. People will give you the answers on how to lead them. And it may not be just voice answers. It could be body cues. It could be discomfort. Nowadays, if somebody's honed in on their phone the whole time, then they're very disengaged. I think there's better tools today, if you're aware of it, to tell where somebody is coming in right off the bat. Think about it. It's easier now, even on video, because you can see somebody's facial expressions. You can see what's going on than just a voice on the phone.
You bring up the honed in on the phone, disengaged. What are some ways that you stay prioritized as it relates to the phone?
Like not being distracted?
Yeah.
So, I have a challenge with that. I'm not the best at that. I've gotten a lot better. I think what a lot of times I do is in the pocket is like, it's so accepted to reach in your pocket and look at your phone. So I think the key is, and I learned, is if you turn it upside down and then face it, because then you have to go pick it and do an action. It's kind of like, if you ever want to not hit snooze, they'll tell you to put the alarm across where you have to actually get up and walk over. Because at that point in time, if you're going to hit snooze, you're really self-defeated at that point. Only challenge with that is if you have a spouse, you may wake them up. So that's maybe not where that's really reasonable. And I know that because in personal experience, that's what I did.
You just shared two truths, right? What you just said, and you said I've not been the best at that as it relates to the phone. So what's your take on vulnerability as a leader? Because it seems like
it's pretty important. I think it's pretty good to be candid with yourself. I think it also gives you something that you can work towards. And, you talk about decisions. That's a decision you made. I think it allows for self-responsibility to exist. And sometimes that's where free will is so important. And sometimes letting yourself down is actually letting yourself up if you actually do something about it.
What do you mean?
Well, if, say you ate a lot of food for a long time and gained a lot of weight, and then you did something about it, and you realized, more importantly, that you weren't going to lose all the weight you put on in one day. You put a plan together of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but you at least help yourself create a routine, because, nobody got overweight overnight and nobody lost it all overnight. It's a process to put it on, and it's a process to put it off. Now, the good thing about the body is it can actually come off faster than you put it on, believe it or not, if you do certain tweaks and hacks, as they say nowadays.
You've been able to, in real time, attract a great team in a market where almost every episode I'm having with those within the industry you are in, which is the American gift industry, the home ownership industry, lending industry, doing unbelievably phenomenal as an organization. So as it relates to decision making and attracting talent, what would be some advice for those listening? Because there are those that are listening within your industry that
on what, how to attract talent, or how to navigate this market, or what?
Attracting talent as it really, and the decisions, what's your thought process around talent and how you've attracted it?
Well, the first thought process around talent is you got to make sure that talent fits. Not all talent fits. Just because somebody's talented doesn't mean that they're going to have the same buy-in as somebody else. And sometimes it's better to compromise a smidge on talent for somebody that buys in more, and not from a yes man standpoint, just from they're going to probably give it a little bit extra effort because it's something that they hold more sacred. Now, that doesn't mean that you come politely blindly, because I do believe part of the leader is, even if people are optimistic about a new job or joining it, you still have to earn over time through your actions their respect, and that takes action. It's the easiest thing to do. If you want to build results, you can't really ask for a favor until you deliver a lot of results. So if you just focus on delivering results, the favors, or if you need anything later, or if something goes down on the business, you're more than able to address it.
That's good. Earn over time the respect. What are some ways that leaders could be undermining that respect building that are listening to this right now with the people? Maybe not even recognizing.
I'm a firm believer that you should respect somebody right out of the gate. You know, the people that say my respect is earned, you know, that's some passive aggressive behavior. What I think is though, I think they got to view it as a bank. Just because it's earned doesn't mean like any investment you don't keep putting more into it instead of just trying to take out right out of the gate. So I'd say really funding the respect
Yeah.
bank account.
What are deposits and what are withdrawals? Let's break. This is good. Some examples of
Deposits are any time you're leveling somebody up for their sake, not yours. So you're providing them a certain level of support, and that could be in a slew of different things: contacts into somebody, anything like that, introduction, supporting them on something that they're doing. So if you want to be part of an organization, supporting them, that's how you really do that.
what about withdrawals? With
That's when you ask for a favor, like something you really need.
what are ways leaders let their followers down?
There's a myriad of ways that you can let them down. I'd say that the biggest one is having two personas. And what I mean by that is, you know, like having a work persona and a home persona, excuse me. I'd say just be who you are at all times. It's a lot less stressful and easier. And that's from anything if you have the opportunity. Like, you know, even in the business sense, how I dress. Yeah, sometimes I wear suits, sometimes I wear hoodies, sometimes I wear t-shirts, but I wear the clothes that I really like. I don't wear what people expect me to wear, like, oh, you're supposed to wear a tie. Like wearing a tie, you know, made somebody perform better. Outside of, I get when people say it's like they're putting on their uniform like sports. I get that. I do. But they have to really feel like it does. If they're doing it and then they're talking about how much their neck bothers them for wearing a tie, then you shouldn't do it. It's just that simple. You should do what you feel is going to put you in the best position to win and in the best position to succeed. It's no different than your health. What's going to put you in the best position to feel well? That's basically the same thing that you're saying is what position is going to make you do well.
In closing, sorry, I just almost sneezed really loud. In closing, 2024, why is it a great year?
Why is it what? A great
year.
I think every year is a great year. I think it's a great year because it's what you do about it. I mean, I know that a lot of people like to start New Year's resolutions. I'm a firm believer that you start 2 weeks before. So by the New Year's resolution, you're actually hitting a stride. That's why usually my goals for the year, for the next year, I set them towards the middle of December. I take inventory and then I set them, you know, because then you kind of get the holiday period and the time period to really get your bearings because you're going to have definitely more free time because business is always slower. There are times that, you know, you're going to this. It's a great time to think, plan, and execute, set up for the execution.
Oh, did you write yourself that letter about where you are in 10 years? There's that I recall that we had a conversation where you wrote yourself a letter.
So what I do is every 5 years, I do it. Well, this time I did a video. And I told myself where I would be at 50 years old. So I got 3 years till then. So I have the video and I did it on the day before my birthday is what I always do. I did it at 35, 40, and 45. Yep. I did it all those.
Great. So you just gave me an idea. That'll be our next show. Where will Eddy be at 50 years old?
Interesting. That's a good take.